There's more of you than I thought there would be at 10 a.m. Hello, thank you for making it. Excellent. Okay. So there are a huge number of problems in the world, and all of them urgent, all of them require our attention. And at the same time, we have limited resources. We have limited time, energy, money. We need to prioritise. What I'd like to argue in this talk is that ending factory farming, ending the immense amounts of suffering that take place on factory farms, is one of the most pressing problems that we currently face, regardless of whether you're a vegetarian or a vegan or somebody who feels any particular affinity for animals or for animal rights. Okay, so when we're looking for pressing problems, those problems that are most worthy of our immediate attention, I think it makes sense to look at problems that are strong on some combination of the following three criteria. So first of all, scale. How big is the problem? All things being equal, we want to focus our efforts on problems that are larger rather than smaller. Secondly, how neglected is the problem? How many people are working on it directly? How many dollars are going towards it? We should expect, all things being equal again, that where problems are more neglected, there is more low-hanging fruit for us to pick. And finally, is this problem solvable? A good sort of proxy question for this criteria is, if we double the amount of resources going towards this problem, how much of the remaining problem would we expect to solve? And I think when we apply these criteria to ending suffering on factory farms, it becomes clear why this is such a pressing problem. Okay, so first of all, scale. We kill an astonishing number of animals on factory farms, as I'm sure you all here at this conference know. So every year we kill around 100 million animals in labs. That's more than the population of the United Kingdom, where I've just come from. We kill around 1.2 billion animals used for fur. Our brains are not very good at thinking in numbers, so I always remind myself that the difference between a million and a billion is the difference between about 12 days and 37 years. Estimates vary, but we kill around 70 billion farmland animals every year. Between 52 and 167 billion farmed fish, and the estimates are difficult here because most of this is measured in tonnes rather than individuals. And anything from 1 to 3 trillion wild-caught fish. Again, because this is really hard to think about, we can imagine what would happen if we held a 1 second silence for every animal that we killed annually. We'd be silent for around 3 years and 4 months for lab animals, 38 years for animals killed for fur, 2,000 years for all the farmed animals that we kill in just the last 12 months alone, and perhaps up to 5,000 years for the farmed fish that we've slaughtered. And of course, scale is not just about numbers, but it's about how we expect those numbers to change. And unfortunately, meat consumption is increasing. It's increasing both because there are more people on the planet who are eating meat, but also because per capita meat consumption is going up and is expected to increase by 15% in 2027 alone. And the final part of scale, when we're considering the scale of a problem, is how deeply does it affect the individuals who need our help. And as I'm sure, again, all of you know, conditions on factory farms, where the vast majority of farmed animals are raised, are routinely appalling. Animals experience chronic pain, amputations without anaesthetic, severe overcrowding. I don't need to go into any more detail about the conditions on factory farms. Okay, the second criteria. How neglected is this problem relative to other global problems that we could be working on? So here are just some of the many organisations working to end suffering on factory farms. One estimate of their budget from 2017 is around $130 million. What else did humanity do with about that much money? That was the box office gross for a film called Sausage Party, about an anthropomorphized sausage. And I'm told that the premise of the film came from the idea of, wouldn't it be awful if the food we ate was sentient? In 2017, philanthropic spending in the US was above $410 billion. Only 12 of that went towards both animals and the environment. Of that 12, a fraction went towards farmed animals. And in total, only one of every $4,000 donated in the US goes towards helping factory farmed animals. Only one in every $4,000 goes towards solving what I think is very arguably the largest human-caused source of suffering on the planet. Okay, we turn to our final criteria. How solvable is this global problem? Most of the work that's been done to date, I think it's probably fair to say, has focused on advocating for people to go vegetarian, people to go vegan. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like this is working particularly well. A recent analysis found that only about 1% of the US population are strict vegetarians, and that number has hardly changed since the 1990s. The recidivism rates are extremely high. Almost 85% of vegetarians will go back to eating meat at some point. And all of this is taking place while the average US citizen is eating more meat and all meat consumption is at an all-time global high. So that's not working. And I think acknowledging that and thinking what else can we complement that approach with, or supplant that approach with, is a question we need to ask. Before I go into some areas that I think might be more effective than individual dietary change, I'd just like to present to you a case study, something I'm sure you've again heard of, the success of corporate cage-free campaigns. So starting in 2015, a number of farmed animal welfare groups campaigned for food suppliers and food producers to commit to moving from caged hens, that you can see there, to cage-free environments. Now, of course, cage-free environments are not our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is a world without factory farming. But most of the evidence and research indicates that this is an improvement for the hens involved in terms of their subjective well-being. So the campaigns involved a very simple as commit to going cage-free by a certain date, were backed up with some very hard-hitting advocacy, undercover investigations, and there seemed to be this domino effect whereby the organisation started with food suppliers such as Aramark, then moved on to fast food chains, securing a pledge from McDonald's in 2015 led to a domino effect throughout the fast food sector. And as of April 2017, all of the top US grocers and 16 of the top 20 US fast food companies have committed to these pledges. One estimate of the cost effectiveness of these pledges, so how much suffering was spared per dollar invested, made a number of conservative assumptions. They said, okay, well, let's just assume that these pledges would have taken place in 5 years anyway. And even on that conservative assumption, the estimate was that for every dollar spent on these campaigns, between 35 and over 200 hens were spared a year of suffering on a factory farm. Of course, it's important to mention that this estimate doesn't account for indirect effects, such as the fact that egg prices may go up, and such as the precedent that has been set of advocates being able to secure change from major institutions on a very wide scale. And credit should be given to the years and years of groundwork and unpaid volunteers that made all of these campaigns possible. Okay, so we've seen that ending factory farming is a huge problem, is highly neglected, and there are some really promising ways to make progress. What are the new horizons that we should be concerned with as animal advocates? promising than advocating for individual dietary change alone. There are a number of reasons we have to think this. Historically, large social change has not been the result of individuals being individually convinced of a moral argument, putting that into practice in their everyday lives, and then that's spreading out through a population. It's just too much effort. That's not what we've seen has happened. In fact, the opposite. We've seen green consumerism and people's individual consumption choices have not led to a marked difference in climate change. And some case studies by an organisation called Sentience Institute look in more depth at other social movements. They don't see individual change sort of carrying the movement to fruition. We also have reason to believe that people are more willing to support institutional reform than individual change, which makes sense. It's a lot easier to support a ballot bill than it is to change a habit that you engage in 3 or more times a day. And relatedly, being able to focus on institutions shifts some blame away from individuals and reduces that cognitive dissonance that I think is one reason why people are not willing to engage with vegan or vegetarian advocacy. For example, a recent poll by the organisation for Analytics found that people are more likely to support welfare reforms when they're framed as a change to the law than when they are framed as something related to individual choice, the purchase of meat. Okay, what's the second thing we should look into? This is obvious, but follow the numbers. Look for where we can help the most animals. Even just looking at this graph, it's extremely clear that broiler chickens and hens in general far outnumber any of the other animals that we could work to improve the lives of. That's not to say we should exclusively focus on these animals, but this is an important factor. And again, it's not to say that numbers alone are the only thing that matters. Obviously, some consideration should be given to the degree of suffering and how much we can do about that suffering, but this is something not to lose sight of. So for broiler chickens, a number of organisations are advocating for higher welfare breeds, so hens that have not been selectively bred to such an aggressive extent that their bodies can physically not cope with the speed of their growth, lower stocking densities, better housing environments, and more humane slaughter. While we're focusing on numbers farmed fish, the numbers of farmed fish in particular are increasing, and they suffer from a number of health problems that are just inherent in the way in which they're farmed. We're unfortunately seeing a rise in factory farmed fish, which again makes it all the more important that we focus on those reforms as early as possible and try and get laws and regulations in place as early as possible. In terms of the overcrowding of fish, a recent report found that trout are currently kept 27 individuals to about 1 cubic metre of water, which is about a bathtub, to give you a sense of just how tightly packed these individuals are at the time of slaughter. Shellfish. We kill hundreds of billions of shrimp and prawns. Their eyelids are routinely slit or cauterized. Tens of billions of crayfish, crabs and lobsters who are boiled alive. We know less about these animals. People care less about these animals. Advocates focus less on these animals, and more fundamental research is needed into how we can improve their welfare. Okay, a third priority. Build strategic advocacy in those areas where we can be most effective. So we want to think of areas where there are a large number of factory farmed animals, where we can expect to make some good progress in the next 20 years or so, where there's potential to build global momentum, building out from the country we've started in. And those strategic regions seem to be the US, Europe, India, and most notably China. China in particular merits mention is that we can't really address ending factory farming unless we address China. Of course, addressing China will also require a few different considerations than those we've applied in Europe and the US. The cultural situation is different, the role of social norms is different, the role of civil society is different. And the earlier we can support those advocates working themselves in China, I think the better. Kickstarting that movement that will hopefully come to fruition in 5 or 10 or 15 years. Finally, there's a lot of neglected research in this area. Things such as affordable and efficacious pain relief. Technologies that could allow us to see the sex of hens in eggs so that we don't have to gas or crush alive billions of male chicks every year. Meta-research into what are we missing? What am I missing in this presentation? What is the next effective intervention area that we should focus on? As well as plant-based and cultured eggs, meat and milk. This is just a signal that there are many other things that advocates are working on that I won't cover here, including focus on what do we do about suffering to wild animals. Okay, finally, money, the important thing. I coordinate a group called Farmed Animal Funders, which comprises just over 20 individuals who are deeply committed to ending factory farming and donate over $250,000 a year. We recently conducted a very, very brief survey into the perceived room for more funding in the movement. This was not methodologically rigorous. I can't emphasize that enough. However, we heard back from 62 organizations working in over 80 countries. We asked them, what funding could you use in the next 12 months and what would you spend it on? And there are far more than 62 organizations working on this. And the total room for funding is far more than I'm about to show you in these numbers. This simply indicates that there is a lot that money can do right now in this movement. So in total, those organisations have spent almost 100 million in the previous 12 months, and we're hoping to raise 140 million in the next 12 months. Over 50% needed to hire new staff. Over 50% needed to roll out new projects. And a fifth wanted to expand their work into new geographical regions. There are plenty of ways to support these organisations in those effective ways that we've just outlined. There are organisations working on institutional change. I won't go through them here, but I will make these slides available. There are organisations focusing particularly on improving the welfare of chickens and fish. There are organisations doing work in China, India, grassroots work carried out by activists who have deep context of the local norms in those areas. There are research organisations carrying out neglected foundational research into Sentience Institute, for example, works on the question of how we can expand humanity's moral circle, how we can bring more individuals into our compassion of care, into our circle of compassion. And I'd also like to note in particular these funds run by EA, the Centre for Effective Altruism, and animal charity evaluators, who we heard from yesterday. And for donors who don't have the time to go through donations themselves or would prefer to defer to experts in these cause areas, these funds are run by panels of experts and aim to provide the highest impact funding opportunities for those who endorse this approach to reducing animal suffering. Okay, so to conclude and to summarise, ending factory farming is a global priority. It's an ongoing moral crisis that's incredibly neglected relative to the other pressing problems that we face, and there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit left to be picked. If we focus on those most effective interventions and work to identify even more effective interventions, I think that the funding we can secure, both from the groups that I work with and from others, can make a huge difference in the short, medium term, and also in the long term. So here are some further resources, and thank you very much.
So we have about 5 minutes for a Q&A if you have any questions for Natalie.
this isn't coming this way? Nope.
What's the situation like for animals in South America?
I think there's been some recent surveys on this. As I understand it, factory farming is taking place in South America and is growing. However, it seems that public support for ending that might have been slightly higher than was previously imagined before the studies. I'd be able to look up that in more detail, but I believe there was a forensics study that covered some of that recently.
So you said that you think the movement is funding constrained, and do you have some ideas how can we bridge this gap? We can, for example, focus on big donors, or we can crowdfund, or how can we solve this?
I think there are, great question, I agree. I think there are numbers of approaches you can take. So there are major donors whose main concern is ending suffering on factory farms. I think that's pretty rare. I think unfortunately, and this is something we need to change, ending factory farming doesn't have the same sort of status within major philanthropy as, say, climate change or poverty, and this is a huge part of the problem. However, there are also a very large number of donors who are interested in human health and the environment and water pollution, and some of those donors recently have been interested in ending factory farming. I think one does have to be careful because, for me, the fundamental basis of why this matters so much is the suffering involved. And if I was more concerned about, say, sort of antibiotic use, the industry could always sweep in and find some technological solution to that without really reducing animal suffering. But that said, I think the movement has to be broad enough to encompass people with a large variety of backgrounds, and to the extent that we all share the goal of ending factory farming, I think that could be a really useful source of funding.
Hello. Just looking around the room today, there's quite a lot of younger people here in this room in their 20s and 30s, and generally the people with the deepest pockets are the people that are slightly older, with their 40s, 50s and 60s. Do you have any tips for anyone in the room to be able to bridge the gap of conversation about building donations and rapport and networking in that space?
That's a really good question. And you're absolutely right. Yes, it does tend to be that way. I found that donating yourself can be a really good way to sort of bridge the gap talking to major donors, because I sometimes talk to donors decades older than myself, and I say, well, when I give my 10% of salary to donate, I give it here for these reasons. And I think that can bridge some of the feeling of you're kind of pitching for funding and they've got the funding, and more it can be a conversation of here are the crucial considerations that I've taken into account, and that's why I've come to these funding decisions, and different considerations could lead to different ones. But I agree, it's something we should think more about. Yes?
So you said the number of vegetarians isn't growing. So how is that true? Because everywhere I look, the numbers are constantly increasing.
I agree, it does. It was surprising to me as well. I would just direct you towards the Animal Charity Evaluator's recent post on this, because it's a little bit complicated, and that there have been lots of studies and surveys. Some of them, when you look into them, are just methodologically ridiculous. Some people have interpreted questions about vegetarianism as meaning, do you ever eat vegetables? And then that skewed the results on some surveys. So this was an attempt to make sense of all the different surveys that have been done. I agree it's surprising. Living in London myself, it feels like there's more vegan and vegetarian options everywhere than ever before. And it might just be that although, first of all, vegans and vegetarians have more options now, are we just sort of catering to people who would have otherwise been, eating slightly less good products? Or perhaps that growth is concentrated in certain small areas that create the impression of more growth than there actually is.
Okay.
Okay, we can thank Natalie for her speech. That's all
Thank
the
you.
time we have.